Thanks, everybody. This is the third item for the June 24th, 2020 DAP meeting. This is 4824 Edgemoor Lane. And the process, we've gone through it, but in case we have folks who haven't, I'll do a brief introduction. The applicant will make their presentation. The panel will make any comments, ask questions, and then if there are members of the public, I'm not sure we have for this item, that we will allow folks to speak, and then we'll conclude. So this is this project is at site plan, and the panel saw this project a number of times at the sketch plan stage, and the main issue that was sort of left to be resolved at site plan and was conditioned in the board's approval was to look at the treatment of the south facade and its relationship to the Chase condominium. So that's something that we'll be looking for. But then also, this is site plan, and so more detailed analysis of conformance with the design guidelines would also be appropriate to discuss here. At the of the panel will have the option to either vote to recommend a certain number of design excellence points, the minimum being 10, or the panel could decide that further review is warranted and the project would need to come back. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Thank you. This is Pat Harris. I'll make a couple of additional remarks and then I'll turn it over to the architects. So when we went to the planning board on April 2nd for the sketch plan, we showed them 3 designs. Really, we were focusing on 2 designs, but we had also included where our sort of ending point had been at that point with the DAP, which was a building that had the southern facade face on line with step backs in the upper facade. But then we were primarily focused on the 2 revised designs, which we had developed based on the DAP's last recommendations, which included angling the facade. And at that time, the planning board looked at all 3 and said that they thought from a sketch plan perspective that any of the 3 were appropriate. We have been, since the time of the sketch plan, working to improve the design in order to mitigate any impacts on the Chase and sort of enhance the compatibility between the 2 buildings. So with that, what I'll do is turn it over to either Rob or Bill, who can put up on the screen our plans and we can walk you through those. Thank you. Rob, are you there?
Rob, are you on?
Rob, you may want to unmute. We were all muted.
Yes, that is exactly it. Sorry about that. Can everybody see my screen now?
We can see it.
We can see.
Okay, perfect.
Fantastic.
So thanks for coming, everybody. So we can get started again on running through our presentation for the site plan submission for the DAP here. So here is an updated rendering of our proposed design, which has not changed substantially from this angle since last we met, but the changes have primarily been along the south facade, which you can start to see on the left of the building as it turns the corner. So moving back into our site plan, again, the site is located 600 feet from the metro, right on the corner of Edgemoor and Woodmont. Small site, 8,006 square feet, with a 120-foot height limit, which we are just under at 118 feet. So here are the views that start to show the existing conditions of what's going on the site as one would come down Woodmont. So from the intersection of Old Georgetown and Woodmont, not Edgemoor. And then essentially as we're coming down, we can see that there's just the single family house that's currently being used as office use. So underdeveloped, certainly. And this is the site plan showing proximity to the metro towers right across the street, as well as the Chase just to the south of us, and the property to the north, which will will be under construction shortly. And then again, showing our height in relation to the other buildings. So just across Woodmont, there's taller buildings, as well as across Edgemoor, the Edgemont 2 being 150-foot height limit, and the Chase to the south also being 120 feet tall. So this is zooming in to our site plan a little bit. We've got the median along Woodmont that has been proposed by Department of Transportation for the bike lane that will be right in front of the street, or right in front of the building, sorry. And we can see that the entrance right here is on the corner of Edgemoor and Woodmont, so easily accessible to the metro and in a visible location. And then we have the parking entries down here and the loading further down, so that we can keep it away from the intersection to the best of our abilities. So going into the floor plans, we'll be using an automated parking system here with approximately 62 spaces currently. It doesn't break down into discrete parking levels, but rather we'll have a series of different levels within essentially one large floor. And then the P1, so just underneath the ground floor, we'll have the utilities. So the ground floor here, we can see that the lobby is right on the corner. We enter in to the elevators in the back, and then the parking has these elevators that can hold one car at a time, 2 elevators, and we can keep essentially 4 cars in the queue and 2 cars using the elevators. And out of 62 cars, that's 10% of the entire capacity, would have to be using it at the exact same time for there to be any sort of backup. And then our loading is located down here on the corner, which would also be used for trash. And then we have a passenger loading space for temporary pickups, Ubers, food deliveries, Amazon, etc. So moving up to the second floor, we have 7 units, and the stairs transfer on this floor so that they can get out on the ground floor. And then the 3rd and 4th floor, because based on what we heard from the DAP at our previous meeting, is that we wanted to establish a 4-story base before starting to manipulate the tower above. So we've done this. So these are the 3rd and 4th floors. And then the typical floors above right here, we can see. So what we're doing here is, this also sparked from a conversation from the DAP, is what we've been doing is we're angling and deflecting the views so that the building is not directly parallel with the Chase to the south. So the Chase also has chamfered corners. And so by sort of angling these off, it's a bit sympathetic to that, as well as making sure that we don't have direct views with the Chase to the south, and creating additional light and air and space. So rather than creating a canyon, we're essentially creating a more dynamic space and relationship between the 2 buildings. So the top floor, the 12th floor, would have 1 less unit, but would have essentially balconies sitting on top, or not balconies, but would have patios sitting on top of these bays that we can see here. And then the roof plan here, we have amenity space as of yet undefined, but will be public space primarily looking to the north so that we don't look into the Chase building. And then the roof plan, which will have mechanical equipment on top of the penthouse. So we can get into the elevations here. So this is the north elevation. Everything will still be brick, so we'll be using a variety of different bricks, dark colored brick at the base with lighter brick and striations up top to break down the massing and reinforce these double height, or the reading of double height openings that we can see along here. And then on the east elevation, we have this mass that sort of holds in place this larger white curved mass beyond and starts to introduce a little bit more verticality rather than horizontality, which will relate more to the towers across Woodmont. This also starts to step back here, as can be seen in the floor plan. So this is what it looks like in elevation. So we're starting to step away from the chase a little bit more, provide more light and air, as well as break down the massing of the building so it isn't, well, quite so massive. So this is the south elevation now. We can see that bay starts to turn the corner here. And then there's another bay that is sort of sympathetic to that one on the other side there. And then the west elevation, which will be seen from the Arlington East neighborhood. So then going into our building section here, we can see that we have this automated parking system, a large pit for several levels of parking, as well as the ground floor here, which will accommodate all of the parking, entry, loading, etc. And then 11 floors above that of residential units with an amenity penthouse on top. And then the section looking the other way, here we can see the utility space cutting through the electrical room right there, as well as the pit for the car elevators. So coming into our precedents, again, we've been looking at primarily masonry, simple facades that add a little bit of liveliness with some staggering openings or a well-organized grid that could establish everything. And a series of different planes, essentially, that might start to add a little bit more depth to the project. So this, we're just going to take a step back, was what we had, or one of the schemes that we had proposed prior to this, where we still had the face online, which can be seen in these two, the best. So this is before we had started to essentially manipulate the south facade a little bit more so that we had the 4-story base and then the dynamic tower above. So we've seen this, and again, we can start to focus on how this, the corner, the southeast corner of the project starts to kind of get chipped away to allow more light and air in there. And then on the northwest, you can see the same thing where the tower starts to pull back a little bit more from the chase to the south over here. So this would be from the southeast. We can see that that mass comes up here and starts to read a little bit more like a tower element, while also breaking down the overall massing of the project in terms of scale of everything. And we can also see that it starts to pull back along this facade, appearing to be a more slender tower. We can see that there's sort of the primary facade right here, and then an additional bay as well. And then from the southwest corner, we can see the other corner. So again, the 4-story base right here with the angles that step back and provide more relief from the chase. Wrong way. So getting back into the design guidelines, what we've started to do is, because Woodmont is along a downtown mixed-use street, we are meeting the sidewalk zone requirements, as well as the building placement between being 15 and 20 feet from the curb. And our base is between 3 and 6 stories. It is now at 4 stories. So again, on Edgemoor, we're also meeting the sidewalk zone requirements as well as building placement. And our base is actually starts to be read as being stepped down to the 2nd story right here to be a little bit more sympathetic to the townhouses on the other corner of the block. So reinforcing the base building placement, or 17 feet on Edgemoor, 15 feet on wood. And we wanted to activate the street through the use of a lot of glazing along the ground floor here. So there isn't any retail to this project, but by keeping it light and open area, it'll be more walkable for the public, as well as with the inclusion of planting along here in these insets. So for the base variation and articulation, we have the face that's established on one corner, and through the use of the horizontality of the project and the grid that's been established, that line is still continuous, but then the second story along the Edgemont facade runs along at the second floor. So it sort of transitions along this large tower element here where the two base heights meet. We also have a series of different plane changes at the second floor with the first and second floor with the insets, and then the plane here that sticks out from the primarily large curved white mass. So as we've discussed, the tower separation distance, because we are below 120 feet and it's a limited property size, we can reduce the tower. We're hoping to reduce the tower setback requirements, which we had discussed. So by doing these angles along the south facade, what we're doing is we're making it a more compatible tower that may not meet the numbers, however, it meets the intent of the guidelines as well as of the county to develop the site. And so here we have the average separation distance. And how we measured this is we took essentially all of the points along our facade, our south facade, and measured the distance of those along the property line and the length of those along the property line and the distance from the property line. We took an average, and that gets us to 35.05 feet between the Chase and our building. So this also then reinforces that idea of the angled massing. So it eliminates all of the direct relationships between windows. Nothing is parallel. So it makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more private for everybody that's actually living there, as well as for the public. As they see the building, it doesn't create this canyon. It creates a little bit more of a interesting and dynamic relationship between the two projects. So this is the tower step back here. So if we did comply with all of the requirements, the project would essentially be a 2,600 square foot floor plate, which is just way too small. And again, reinforcing that with some massing. So this is what would happen if we strictly complied with what the design guidelines intends for, but for this site, it isn't really feasible. And then endeavoring to reduce the bulk with these different methods of design. So what we have here is a series of double height readings with the banding along the primary white mass, as well as through these double height openings along this secondary tower piece. So this breaks down the scale of the building as well as the visual scale of all the openings. It modulates the units. And the addition of balconies also adds depth and liveliness to the facade. And then in addition to that, we also have a series of different vertical plane changes to limit the face of the buildings. So along the corner, the northwest corner, the northeast corner, the southeast corner, there's a series of different plane changes to break down the overall massing of the project. And then here, which we can discuss, is on the west facade is a potential area for public art. So not all of this will be used necessarily, could be, but this is the area that has been determined to for a mural of some kind. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to hear questions, feedback, provide any responses that we can.
So this is Rod Hender. I think you definitely improved the architecture of, I think it is the southeast corner. I know the traffic on Woodmont moves in the opposite direction, but if you could believe you're a pedestrian and working in the other direction, I think you'd find that corner is much improved, both visually, how the building's massing work, but also I think for the residential units that will actually look down Woodmont Street.
South, I really do think the south facade, based on our last conversation, has gone in the right direction, and I suspect it's about as effective as it's going to be for this particular site. So I think that's a successful effort, in my opinion.
This is Carl. Can we have the image going down Woodmont so I can see that 4-story base, which I'm not all that happy with as it relates to the Chase? See how it rises back there. You've got this strong 2-story base, and then all of a sudden we have two kind of outlying floors that I'm confused about. Can you also go in the opposite direction down Woodmont? Tell us about that 2-story. Why you have that 2 stories on top of the base that's 2 stories high? What was the thinking there?
Yeah, so that was the 4 stories was what we had all discussed, and the thinking was essentially that because Woodmont has the higher zone, so it had the 3 to 6 story base, that we could meet the 4 stories right there, and then using the tower piece to sort of transition down to a 2-story base on Edgemoor, because that had the 2 to 4 story base requirement.
Yeah, but its integration with your Woodmont elevation seems kind of awkward. I mean, I see this very strong corner, which I really like, the top 6 or 7 stories, and then it sits down on top of this 2-story piece that doesn't seem to come around the corner and relate to the Woodmont piece. So I think that could use a little bit of attention. I'm not convinced that you need a 4-story base there. That's, I guess, number one. Number two, if you need it because of FAR and your unit size, that's something else. But that's right now seems very awkward relative to the rest of the building, which seems to be very well coordinated. Can you go around and see the corner to the north again? There. What is the material of the 2-story spandrel that separates the white that's coming down from the tower, hits that gray, and then continues on with a little bit muted more white, and then white? In other words, what is the role of that gray spandrel right there, interrupting, if you will, what I used to call the zipper approach of the corner? Tell me about that gray.
Yeah, so the building is all going to be brick, but the thought here was that essentially we would have this large white mass that's kind of been picked up off the ground a little bit, and then the 2 tower pieces, so this one right here, and then we can kind of see the corner of it holding up that piece, but then the material just keeps going beyond it. So same reading, but sort of chipped away or pushed back at the bottom to provide more public space.
Carl, would your issue be addressed if we have another 2-story spandrel? So we have one on the second floor and then one on the 4th floor to equal the base?
Well,
So that way they're kind of a little more cohesive. And
Well-
and my thought is there, if we could even expand that to the western facade, and that might help frame the artwork, because the artwork is not going to be in the lower third anyways. So we kind of continue a spandrel at the 2-story level on the 4th story level, so it works well with the base, and we could even move it to the west to help us frame the mural that's going to be on the upper 2/3 of the building. Would
Yeah,
that address your concern?
I hear you, and I can understand the logic of it, but I'm more worried about how strong these two horizontal spandrels are going to defeat the towerness, if you will, of the building. I mean, I really think looking at eliminating the gray spandrel right there at the corner, for those two, that one zone, yeah, right in there, might allow that continuity at the corner to come all the way down. I'm just, it's one of these rendering issues, that what is that gray stuff as opposed to the white stuff, as opposed to the really darker gray stuff. But that spandrel seems very heavy there. And if you move it up to the 4th floor, I think it's like raising your pants too high on the building.
Too high.
Yeah, I think that's too high. So,
Carl, picking up on Sean's statement, what if that 4th level became just spandrel only? So it actually just skipped through the frame. I hear what you're saying about the belt being too high if that whole thing raises, but that line would not be like the 3rd floor line, which is continuous. It would be discontinuous through there, and it would be much finer, so not to defeat. There's a certain hierarchy of verticals to horizontals.
Yeah, I can relate to that. If the one that's at the 2-story would be eliminated then. But anyway, I think it's just variations on a theme. I think the overall gestalt of the building, I think, is sound, and I think the camp, the cranking of the elevation as it relates to the chase is the correct move to go with.
The obvious question is, if we continued that down to floors 4 and 3, then your issue goes away, basically, because you have a 2-story base. And I do think that breaking that spandrel over the entry is something Carl's been hitting on for the last few months, I think would be an improvement. But I mean, it seems to me it's easy for us to say that if you eliminated the rectangular component for floors 3 and 4 on the south facade and kept it typical, the building would probably be improved.
Yeah, I agree.
All very good points.
I agree with those comments. I'd also like to just kind of highlight where the gray base reaches towards the top, and you got the balconies reaching out over it, so you got this serrated line up there. If you look at the diagrams you showed earlier, they were kind of cleaner and simpler. And maybe as you go into site plan, you can maybe simplify that and make that a little bit at the top. Also, there's a little bit of chaos associated with the parking garage entrance versus the loading dock entrance that'll need some more careful study.
Sure.
Agreed on that one.
Just to confirm that last point, when you say chaos, you're talking about just design elements on that facade as it relates to those two?
It's visual chaos.
Okay,
It's not functional chaos, it's visual chaos.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
This is Chow Joy. I agree a lot with a lot of the comments here. I do believe that breaking the spandrel at the corner will help to make the corner more pronounced. And I like the treatment of the south facade. I think that's improved a lot. And then I think the people in the Chase building will be happier. Hopefully they will satisfy their, their desires. So I think it's moving towards the right direction.
Is there anybody that we didn't hear from? Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think everything that was said is pretty clear, and I would agree with all of it.
Yeah, this is Damon. I think this is consistent with what we've seen in the past, the evolution of this project. I think you guys are definitely moving in the right direction from our previous meetings together, and I agree with the other comments.
I don't think we had any members of the public signed up to speak. Was there anybody else who wanted to say anything? Okay, so then, so as I mentioned, this project is at site plan. I think, has the application been submitted, or are we imminently submitting?
It has not yet been submitted, depending on how you define imminently, maybe like 2 weeks time, a week or 2 or 3, I'd say.
Okay, so so I think without an application, I think that we don't have that might be a little problematic in terms of a final vote, but in terms of the number of points being requested. But I also heard from the panel that there were concerns that or design issues that for which they would like to see further development. Is the sense of the panel that they would like to see the project another time to address those other issues, because we haven't really gotten into a lot of the issues that were raised today are ones that we haven't really been focusing on. Is the sense of the panel that they'd like to see this project again?
No.
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay. So, Pat, how many design excellence points were you requesting?
So previously we had requested more, but the staff report had indicated 10, but that was based on the prior facades. And as everyone has just stated and observed, the facades have come a very long way from where we started. And so we're requesting 15 points. The 10, the 10's the absolute base, and 15.
Yeah, I think, was it 15 out of 20 we were requesting?
It's 30's the max.
Yeah.
It's okay. But was it Pat? Pat LeVay, you remember? Was it 20 out of 30 then? What did you initially request, Pat?
I think we initially requested 25. Way back
Okay.
when.
And that's more for just sort of a point of reference. So from the panel, so is there a recommendation for a number of points that the panel is willing to support, 10 being the minimum?
Well, I think I can support 10.
I can support 15, but I would like to see more articulation of the facade and materials in site plan.
I can support 15, George.
So I want to reiterate that this is site plan. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the panel made it clear that they didn't want to see it again. So if the panel votes on a number of points, you won't see this project again unless they come back for an amendment.
I just looked at it. It says it's a sketch plan narrative. Maybe I'm seeing the wrong thing.
So it could be because they haven't submitted the site plan application, so that there isn't a site plan application that we've accepted as complete. So, typically we do, typically we have at site plan, we have an application in front of us, but there's nothing that says that we have to. So at this point, it would be the panel's decision to wait for an application or not.
Elza, I have a question. Is it possible, since the clear direction was they don't want to say, the panel doesn't want to say it again, and I certainly understand that, to given the history, to say, assuming that the majority supports 15, that the majority supports 15 points, assuming, and then we can list the various things that we heard, the removal of the spandrel of the entrance, et cetera.
And we would, and we would do that in any case.
Okay.
Or at least the panel would vote to say, approval with conditions, and it's typical that it's approval with conditions. Okay, so 15 is the number I'm hearing. Do we have 3? So votes in favor of recommending 15 points with the direction provided in the comments, which will be supplied in the written notes shortly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I support that.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Rod.
I'm sorry, but I'm still with 10. But I get outvoted, so.
Okay, well, I only have, so I heard Carl and I heard Xiaojoy for 15.
George was yes.
George, okay. So, and Damon?
Yeah, I'm at 10 also.
Okay. So the 15 will then, with 3 votes, will carry the day. And we will note that in the memo for the site plan application. And with that, I think we have concluded our business for June 24th, 2020. And Emily, do we have anything scheduled for July at this point?
Yes.
Yes. So we
One
have
of my projects.
Okay.
4702 Chevy Chase Drive.
Excellent. All right, then if there is nothing else, then everybody stay safe and take care of yourselves. And the video and notes will be available online shortly.
And Elza, if I could just say thank you to the panel. I know you spent an inordinate amount of time on this particular project. I do think that the outcome is a very good looking project, and we appreciate your input. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
All right, take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.